Imagine this: a CEO at the absolute pinnacle of his power, presiding over a world-renowned luxury hotel. He's charismatic, yes, but also utterly dismissive, arrogantly convinced he's untouchable. Then, a guest, seemingly out of place, walks into his meticulously crafted kingdom. He dismisses her, he humiliates her, he has her thrown out. But here's the twist: the incredible, unbelievable turn of events that security footage would later confirm, piece by agonizing piece. Exactly 20 minutes after he had her escorted from his property, she became his new boss. How did it happen? What transpired in those crucial 20 minutes that flipped a power dynamic so spectacularly? This isn't just a story about a bad day at the office. This is about unchecked privilege, implicit bias, and the shocking truth that sometimes the person you think you're above is actually the one holding all the cards. This is the story of a Grand Meridian reckoning, and it all begins in that opulent, unsuspecting lobby. The early evening sun cast long, golden shadows across Trevor Hamilton's corner office, high above Chicago's bustling streets. This wasn't just an office, it was a testament, a shrine to his unwavering belief in his own genius. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, a silhouette against the breathtaking cityscape, a half-smile playing on his lips. His bespoke suit, tailored to perfection, felt like a second skin, exuding an air of effortless command. This was his kingdom, the Grand Meridian, a jewel in the crown of international grandeur holdings, and he, Trevor Hamilton, was its undisputed king. Every polished surface, every silk-lined wall, every antique furnishing whispered his name. He had built this, or rather perfected it, and in his meticulously curated, impeccably maintained world, no one told him no. He inhaled the rich scent of polished leather and success, a potent cocktail that fueled his conviction. He was, and always would be, untouchable. A gentle buzz vibrated on the sleek mahogany desk, pulling Trevor from his self-congratulatory reverie. He glanced down at his phone. It was Rebecca, his ex-wife. He rolled his eyes, a dismissive flick of his wrist, and let the call go to voicemail. There was always something with Rebecca, always some demand or complaint. He swiped to check his emails instead. A low grumble escaped his lips as he scrolled past a memo about upcoming regional assessments. Corporate scrutiny. It was always corporate scrutiny. Unconfirmed rumors had been swirling for weeks about some new initiative to standardize operations across all Grand Meridian properties. He scoffed, muttering, "Ridiculous," under his breath, as if his hotel, his meticulous operations, needed standardizing. He'd built this empire on his own terms, and the thought of some nameless corporate drone poking around his domain was an annoyance, nothing more. He dismissed the thought as easily as he'd dismissed Rebecca's call. A soft knock at the door, and Kelly, his executive assistant, entered, carrying a crystal decanter of amber liquid and a single glass. "Your evening bourbon, Mr. Hamilton," she said, her voice soft, almost deferential. She set it on a coaster on his desk. "Operations are running smoothly, per usual. Just a minor note from the front desk." Trevor waved a dismissive hand, already reaching for the decanter. "Go on, Kelly. What's the minor note?" Kelly hesitated, wringing her hands slightly. "Well, the front desk mentioned a guest who seemed confused about her reservation. Said she was Dr. Carter. They couldn't find her in our system at all." Trevor paused, bourbon mid-pour. "Confused? Meaning she had no reservation?" Kelly nodded. "That seemed to be the case, sir. They suggested she might have booked at a different hotel, perhaps a budget chain nearby." Trevor poured his drink, the brief flicker of annoyance fading. "And how was it handled?" "They followed standard protocol, Mr. Hamilton," Kelly reported, a nervous tremor still in her voice. "They offered to assist her in locating her actual reservation or finding appropriate accommodations elsewhere if she required them. She seemed agitated, but eventually left." Trevor nodded, taking a long, slow sip of his bourbon. "Excellent. As it should be. The Grand Meridian's reputation depended on maintaining standards. We can't have just anyone walking in, claiming a reservation they don't possess. It compromises the experience for our true clientele. Kelly offered a weak, relieved smile, though a flicker of worry remained in her eyes that Trevor chose to ignore. He'd handled countless such misunderstandings during his tenure. It was always the same. A guest, usually one who didn't quite fit the Grand Meridian's prestigious image, attempting to secure services they weren't entitled to. Easy enough to dismiss. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, pleased with the efficiency. Just blocks away, parked discreetly in her sleek BMW, Dr. Nicole Carter gazed at the glittering facade of the Grand Meridian. The very hotel Trevor Hamilton had just dismissed her from, though she was still blissfully unaware of that fact. She smoothed down the lapels of her impeccably tailored suit, a silent ritual to steady her nerves. Tonight was more than just a business trip. It was a pivotal moment in her career. Regional Director of Operations for International Grandeur Holdings. A black woman, pioneering change in a historically rigid industry. The weight of expectation, both her own and those who believed in her, settled on her shoulders. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over Denise's contact. A quick text. "Walking into my new hotel now. Wish me luck." She hit send, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the crisp October evening. Tonight, things were about to change, in ways no one could foresee. The Grand Meridian stood like a beacon against the Chicago skyline, its polished glass and imposing architecture a monument to luxury. Nicole approached the ornate entrance, feeling a familiar surge of professional admiration mixed with anticipation. A doorman, uniformed in crisp livery, offered a polite nod and held open the heavy brass doors. "Good evening, ma'am." "Good evening," Nicole replied, her voice calm and confident. The lobby unfurled before her, a breathtaking symphony of marble, velvet, and diffused light. A grand piano played a soft classical melody in the corner. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the impossibly high ceiling, reflecting the soft glow of sconces. It was everything she expected, and more. She walked with purpose across the polished floors, her heels clicking a rhythmic beat towards the ornate concierge desk. "Good evening," she said to the concierge, a polite young man with a neatly tied cravat. "I have a reservation under Dr. Nicole Carter." The young concierge, his smile faltering, tapped at his keyboard. "I'm sorry, Dr. Carter," he began, his voice laced with confusion, "but I don't see any reservation under that name." Nicole's brow furrowed. "That's impossible. I have a confirmed reservation. Perhaps it's under International Grandeur Holdings? I'm here for a corporate assessment." The concierge typed again, his face growing more stressed. "No, ma'am. Nothing. Are you certain you have the correct hotel? Perhaps it was a different Grand Meridian location?" A tall, slender man with a neatly trimmed beard, the front desk manager, Marcus Thorne, stepped up, overhearing the exchange. He offered Nicole a polite, albeit nervous smile. "Is there a problem, Mark?" he asked the concierge. "It seems Dr. Carter's reservation isn't appearing, Mr. Thorne," the concierge replied. Marcus turned to Nicole. "May I see your confirmation number, Dr. Carter?" Back in the Grand Meridian lobby, the opulent space, usually a quiet hum of luxury, now held a palpable tension. Dr. Nicole Carter stood before the concierge desk, her earlier composure beginning to fray at the edges. Marcus Thorne, the front desk manager, a man whose usual demeanor was one of polite efficiency, now looked distinctly uncomfortable. Nicole, her voice tight but calm, offered her confirmation number again, a 7-digit alphanumeric string that should have instantly pulled up her executive suite booking. "It's right here," she insisted, pointing to the screen of her phone, which displayed the email from International Grandeur Holdings. IG 743M2. Marcus typed it in, his fingers hovering over the keyboard with an almost theatrical slowness. He frowned, his eyes darting between the screen and Nicole's expectant face. I'm sorry, Dr. Carter," he stammered, his voice laced with a forced professionalism that barely masked his unease. "This number, it doesn't match our format. I'm afraid this may be fraudulent." The word hung in the air, cold and sharp. Nicole felt a jolt of disbelief, then a hot flush of anger. Fraudulent. She, Dr. Nicole Carter, Regional Director of Operations for International Grandeur Holdings, accused of fraud. Her jaw tightened, her knuckles turning white as she gripped her phone. The accusation, delivered with a nervous but firm conviction, was a direct assault on her integrity, her very identity. This wasn't just a mix-up, it was an accusation, and it set her on edge. The ripple of Marcus's accusation seemed to draw attention like a magnet. From his vantage point near the grand staircase, Trevor Hamilton, ever attuned to the rhythm of his hotel, noticed the slight commotion. He strode towards the desk, a picture of effortless authority in his custom suit, his presence radiating an almost gravitational pull. Guests, who had been discreetly watching, now pretended not to, though their gazes remained fixed. "Is there a problem here, Marcus?" Trevor's voice was smooth, confident, yet carried an undertone of impatience. He didn't wait for an answer, his eyes sweeping over Nicole. He took her in. Her elegant, professional attire, yes, but also the rich brown of her skin, the confident set of her shoulders that, to his prejudiced eye, seemed out of place in his grand meridian. He'd made his judgment before a single word was spoken. Marcus, visibly relieved by his CEO's arrival, quickly explained, "Mr. Hamilton, this guest, Dr. Carter, claims to have a reservation, but the confirmation number she provided appears to be fraudulent. We can't find her in the system." Trevor nodded, his gaze returning to Nicole, now condescending. He didn't ask for the number, didn't offer to check himself. "Dr. Carter," he said, his tone dismissive, as if addressing a child, "I assure you, our system is infallible. This doesn't appear to be legitimate. I'm afraid someone may have taken advantage of you with a false booking." He offered a patronizing, sympathetic smile, a mask for his deeper prejudice, effectively dismissing her claims without a shred of genuine inquiry. Trevor Hamilton, already turning away, clearly considered the matter closed. He'd delivered his verdict, and in his world, that was the end of it. He gestured vaguely towards the lobby entrance. "Marcus," he instructed, his voice just loud enough to carry, but not so loud as to cause a scene. "I'd be happy to have my staff help Dr. Carter find appropriate accommodations elsewhere for the evening." The words struck Nicole like a physical blow. Appropriate accommodations elsewhere. The emphasis on appropriate wasn't lost on her. It wasn't about the reservation, not really. It was about her race, her presence in his grand meridian. It was a subtle, insidious jab, a classist, racist dismissal, wrapped in a veneer of polite concern. It implied she didn't belong, that the grand meridian was not appropriate for her kind. Nicole's eyes narrowed, her initial shock giving way to a cold, simmering rage. The patronizing tone, the dismissive wave of his hand, the thinly veiled insult, it all solidified into a clear pattern. This wasn't a mistake, it was an intentional act of prejudice. She could feel the stares of the other guests, the quiet judgment, the assumption that Trevor, the powerful white man, must be in the right, and she, the black woman, must be the problem. The humiliation burned, but it was quickly overshadowed by a fierce, defiant anger. She would not be dismissed quietly. Trevor, still half-turned, heard Nicole clear her throat and start to speak. He paused, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. He wasn't accustomed to guests, especially those he'd implicitly deemed inappropriate, challenging his authority. He pivoted back fully, his voice now noticeably louder, cutting through the hushed elegance of the lobby. "The only misunderstanding here, Dr. Carter," he announced, his words echoing slightly off the marble and gold, "is someone thinking they can show up at the Grand Meridian with a fake reservation and expect us to accommodate fraud." The lobby, already quiet, fell into a stunned silence. Every eye was now fixed on the scene. Nicole's face burned, a mix of pure fury and a deep, mortifying shame. Public humiliation. It was exactly what he intended. Her hands clenched into fists, her body vibrating with suppressed rage. Trevor, seeing her frozen by the public spectacle, pressed his advantage. He pulled out his phone, already dialing. "Security," he barked into the receiver, his gaze never leaving Nicole's. "I have a guest here who is refusing to leave the premises after attempting to present a fraudulent booking. I need them escorted out immediately." Two burly security guards, already alerted by the raised voices, began to move from the shadows near the elevators. The scene was playing out exactly as Trevor desired: swift, public, and utterly humiliating for Nicole. The Grand Meridian's reputation, in his mind, remained untarnished. The security guards began to advance, their presence adding another layer of intimidation. Nicole felt the urge to lash out, to scream, to defend herself against the baseless accusation and the crushing public humiliation. But then, a flicker of strategic thought cut through the white-hot rage. Making a scene, engaging in a physical confrontation, would only play into Trevor's narrative. It would confirm his implicit bias, justify his actions in the eyes of the silent, judging onlookers. She would lose her dignity, and he would win. No. She would leave, but not quietly. She took a deep, shaky breath, straightened her shoulders, and with a controlled, almost glacial dignity, began to walk towards the exit. The security guards hesitated, clearly confused by her sudden compliance, but Trevor merely watched, a smug, satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He thought he'd won. But as she reached the grand revolving doors, Nicole stopped. She turned, her gaze, though still burning with fury, now held a sharp, dangerous glint of defiance. It locked onto Trevor Hamilton, who stood watching, still triumphant. Her voice, though low, carried an undeniable power, cutting through the lingering silence of the lobby. "Remember this moment, Mr. Hamilton," she said, each word precise and weighted with promise. "Remember every detail, because in about 20 minutes you're going to wish you had." With that chilling warning, Nicole Carter pushed through the doors and stepped out into the cool Chicago night, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Trevor Hamilton watched Nicole Carter disappear through the revolving doors, his initial smugness giving way to a fleeting, almost imperceptible flicker of doubt. Her words, so calm yet so cutting, had pricked at him for a second. 20 minutes? Wish he had what? He quickly dismissed it. Just a frustrated guest. Probably some scam artist trying to save face. He was Trevor Hamilton, CEO of the Grand Meridian. No one spoke to him like that, and got away with it. He turned to Marcus, who was still standing stiffly behind the concierge desk, looking a little pale. "Everything handled, sir?" Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Trevor straightened his tie, a confident smile returning to his face. "Perfectly, Marcus. Just as it should be. We don't tolerate fraud or disruptive behavior at the Grand Meridian. Our reputation depends on maintaining impeccable standards, and I protected those standards tonight." He gave Marcus a firm, reassuring nod, as if he expected Marcus to admire his decisive action. Marcus, however, simply offered a tight, unconvincing smile, his eyes still holding a hint of concern. Trevor didn't notice. He surveyed his lobby, now returning to its hushed, elegant normal. He'd done his job. He'd sent a clear message. The incident was over. He had no idea how profoundly wrong he was. The clock was ticking, not just on a vague promise, but on the very foundation of his carefully constructed kingdom. Trevor Hamilton retreated to the sanctuary of his corner office, the incident in the lobby already fading into a minor annoyance, a brief ripple in the otherwise placid waters of his perfect evening. He walked to his polished mahogany bar, the crystal decanter gleaming under the soft lights. With a practiced hand, he poured himself another generous measure of bourbon, the amber liquid swirling invitingly. He took a long, slow sip, the warmth spreading through him, easing any lingering tension from the minor confrontation. He settled into his plush leather chair, gazing out at the shimmering expanse of the Chicago skyline. The city lights twinkled like a million tiny successes, each one a testament to ambition, to power, to the kind of life he had built for himself. He was untouchable, unassailable. The woman's defiant parting words, "You're going to wish you had," seemed utterly ridiculous, the desperate bluster of someone who had been caught. He checked his watch. Barely 5 minutes had passed since she left. Plenty of time before he needed to even consider what she meant, if anything at all. He leaned back, a faint, contented smile on his face. He had no idea that in less than 15 minutes, his phone, sitting silently on his desk, would begin to ring. And when it did, it would signal the beginning of the end of everything he thought he knew. Nothing, not his status, not his power, not his carefully cultivated reality, would ever make sense again. The aroma of fine bourbon filled Trevor's office as he relaxed, the earlier confrontation already a distant memory. He pulled up the latest revenue reports on his tablet, a satisfied hum escaping his lips. Numbers were up across the board. Occupancy rates were soaring. Guest satisfaction, according to their internal metrics, was at an all-time high. Impeccable standards, he thought. My standards. A notification pinged on his screen. A new email. It was from Harrison Blackwell, a respected member of the International Grandeur Holdings Board, a man whose opinion Trevor deeply valued. He opened it, a smirk forming as he read the subject line, "Regarding this evening's incident." He scrolled down, anticipating the praise, and it was there, in black and white. "Trevor," the email read, "I wanted to personally commend you on how professionally you handled the situation in the lobby tonight. Protecting the brand is paramount, and your decisive action was exactly what was needed. Rest assured, the board fully supports your commitment to maintaining the Grand Meridian's elite reputation." Trevor's chest swelled with pride. Validation. Not just from his own ego, but from the highest echelons of the company. He leaned back, utterly complacent, utterly confident. If even Harrison Blackwell saw it as a job well done, then there was absolutely nothing to worry about. He had no inkling that this very email would become a damning piece of evidence, yet another layer of ironic calm before the impending storm. The door to his office creaked open, and Kelly, his assistant, entered, her face etched with a nervous expression that Trevor was far too self-satisfied to notice. The opulent calm of Trevor Hamilton's corner office was shattered, not by a crash, but by the subtle tremor in Kelly's posture. She stood by his desk, her hands clasped tightly, a nervous energy radiating from her usually composed frame. Trevor, still basking in the afterglow of his decisive action in the lobby, barely registered it at first. He was reviewing the morning's projections, satisfied with the upward trend. "Sir," Kelly began, her voice a little too tight, "Marcus, the front desk manager, just called again. He seemed quite concerned about the woman from last night. Dr. Carter." Trevor's brow furrowed. "Concerned? About a scam artist? Kelly, you're letting the staff get sentimental. I handled it. Perfectly." He waved a dismissive hand, not looking up from his tablet. Kelly shifted her weight, her gaze flickering to the door. "He said she seemed very confident, sir. Unusually so for someone in her situation. He felt a need to double-check her information, even after you left." Trevor finally looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Are you questioning my judgment, Kelly? My instincts about character? This hotel operates on a certain level of discernment. That woman did not meet it. End of story." He leaned back, the dismissal evident in his stance. Kelly's fidgeting hands tightened further, but she knew better than to argue. The air in the room, however, had turned subtly cold. Outside the Grand Meridian, in the quiet, insulated bubble of her luxury car, Dr. Nicole Carter was a hurricane of suppressed emotion. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled violently as they gripped the steering wheel. The polished marble facade of the hotel, now a blurred monument of her humiliation in the rearview mirror, mocked her. She had driven only a block before pulling over. The sheer force of the insult, the indignity, the raw rage, threatening to overwhelm her. A single tear escaped, tracing a hot path down her cheek. How could this have happened? How could she, a highly educated, accomplished black woman, a regional director of operations for International Grandeur Holdings, be treated like a common criminal? She felt a primal scream bubbling in her throat, but professionalism, years of training, held it captive. She fumbled for her personal phone, her thumb hovering over Denise's contact. Her best friend. But what would she even say? How do you explain to someone you've just been publicly humiliated, discriminated against, and removed from the very hotel you were supposed to be running? The words wouldn't form. The shame was a physical weight, the rage a burning coal in her chest. She took a ragged breath, trying to regain control. Just as Nicole was about to drop her phone, defeated, a new vibration started. Not her personal line, but her work phone, tucked away in her briefcase. It buzzed, then vibrated again, a relentless, insistent hum. The screen flashed. International Grandeur Holdings. Incoming call. Then another, and another. Her eyes, still stinging, widened slightly. They knew. Someone knew. She swallowed, her heart beginning to pound a different rhythm, one of dread, mingled with a strange, fierce anticipation. This was it. The corporate machine was beginning to turn. She ignored the first 3 calls, needing a moment to steel herself, to push down the raw emotion that still threatened to choke her. On the 4th persistent buzz, she finally answered, her voice surprisingly steady, though brittle at the edges. "Dr. Carter," a crisp, commanding voice filled the car's interior. It was Vivian Sterling, Senior Vice President of Operations, her direct supervisor. "Nicole, how's the Chicago assessment going? Just checking in, making sure you settled in all right." The casual tone was so starkly juxtaposed with Nicole's current reality that a bitter, humorless laugh almost escaped her. Nicole took a deep, fortifying breath. The time for polite pleasantries was over. "Vivian," she began, her voice gaining a steely edge that belied the trembling in her hands, "the Chicago assessment is going to be very interesting. In fact, I was just removed from the property." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Vivian's voice, sharp with disbelief, cut through the quiet. "Removed? What do you mean, removed? Nicole, did you use the corporate codes? Are you sure there wasn't some misunderstanding about your identity?" The implication that Nicole, a highly respected corporate director, might have somehow caused this herself, grated on Nicole's last nerve. The carefully controlled rage fled. "Vivian," Nicole enunciated, each word precise and cold, "I presented my identification. I presented a legitimate reservation, booked directly through the Executive Access Portal of International Grandeur Holdings, and I was dismissed as a fraudulent guest, publicly humiliated, and had security called on me by the CEO of the Grand Meridian Hotel, Trevor Hamilton himself." Another silence, heavier this time. Then Vivian's voice, now stripped of any casualness, filled the car. "Hold for a moment, Nicole. I need to bring legal and corporate security onto this call. This is completely unacceptable." "Stay right there, Nicole. Do not move from your current location," Vivian's voice commanded, now a tone of urgent, professional decisiveness. "I'm conference calling you with Martin Brooks from Legal and Jennifer Walsh from Corporate Security. This is completely unacceptable. We will get to the bottom of this immediately." Nicole listened, her expression resolute. The tremor in her hands had quieted, replaced by a surge of grim satisfaction. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about the company, about the very values International Grandeur Holdings claimed to uphold. Vivian's rapid-fire instructions, the click and hum of the conference call connecting, the sharp intake of breath on the other end as Martin and Jennifer joined, it all signaled a rapid escalation. This was no longer a personal affront. It was a corporate crisis, a declaration of war. Nicole remained silent, waiting. Her breathing was steady. The hotel still loomed in her rear view, a dark, imposing silhouette. But its power over her emotions was already waning. Now it was her turn to wield power. The voices of Martin Brooks, the calm, measured legal counsel, and Jennifer Walsh, the sharp, analytical head of corporate security, joined Vivian's on the line. The air crackled with a new kind of tension, the focused intensity of a corporate team in crisis mode. "Dr. Carter," Martin's voice was grave, "can you walk us through exactly what happened from the moment you arrived at the Grand Meridian?" Nicole closed her eyes for a brief second, replaying the humiliating encounter. Then, with controlled composure, she began. Her voice, calm and clear, recounted every detail: her arrival, the concierge's confusion, Marcus Thorne's initial dismissal, and finally, Trevor Hamilton's arrogant intervention. She described his condescending tone, his casual dismissal of her legitimate reservation, and the public accusation of fraud. She didn't embellish, didn't raise her voice, but the weight of her words hung heavy in the silence. In the background, she could hear the rapid-fire clicks of a keyboard, documenting every word. This wasn't just a phone call. It was a formal deposition, the foundation of a swift and brutal investigation. As Nicole finished her account, the silence on the line was thick with the weight of her words. It wasn't just a personal slight. It was a corporate catastrophe. Martin Brooks, the legal counsel, was the first to speak, his voice tight with alarm. If this was discrimination based on race, and it certainly sounds like it, we're looking at federal civil rights violations, not to mention the PR nightmare. This could unravel years of our diversity and inclusion initiatives. He paused, and Nicole could almost see him mentally calculating the millions in potential lawsuits and brand damage. Jennifer Walsh from corporate security chimed in, her tone grim. The security footage from the lobby will be crucial, and Mr. Hamilton, the CEO, he's about to get a very interesting phone call. A very interesting phone call indeed. Nicole allowed herself a small, knowing smile. The massive consequences Trevor Hamilton was about to face were starting to take shape. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the integrity of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and they were ready to protect it at all costs. Vivian's voice, now a whip-crack of efficiency, cut through the grim pronouncements. All right, Nicole. Here's the immediate plan. First, we're activating our full crisis management protocol. Legal and security will begin their deep dive immediately. We'll be pulling every shred of data related to the Grand Meridian and its management. For tonight, you're not returning there. We've booked you into the Ritz-Carlton under a private corporate reservation. Get some rest. You'll need it. Nicole listened, a sense of power steadily building within her. This was the response she expected. The corporate might rallying to rectify a severe injustice. But tomorrow morning, Vivian continued, her voice hardening with purpose, you're going back to the Grand Meridian. But this time, Nicole, you're going as the Regional Director of Operations. You'll be leading the on-site investigation, conducting interviews, and ensuring full compliance. Mr. Hamilton will be informed of your arrival and your new temporary role by morning. He won't have a choice but to cooperate. The words hung in the air, a promise of impending triumph. Nicole ended the call, the silence in her car now feeling heavy with anticipation rather than dread. For the first time since she had walked into the Grand Meridian's lobby, a genuine, albeit grim, smile touched her lips. She looked at the imposing hotel one last time, its lights blazing against the darkening Chicago sky. Tomorrow, she would return to that marble lobby. But this time, Trevor Hamilton would learn exactly who he'd thrown out. He would understand the profound mistake he had made in underestimating her, in dismissing her, in humiliating her. She put the car in drive, pulling away from the curb, a new energy coursing through her. The Ritz-Carlton awaited, a temporary respite before the real work began. The dark silhouette of the Grand Meridian receded in her rearview mirror, but in her mind's eye, a new image was forming. A sunrise, casting a long, powerful shadow of justice over the city. The reckoning was coming, and she would be leading it. The next morning, The Chicago skyline glittered with crystalline clarity, a stark contrast to the murky moral landscape of the Grand Meridian Hotel. Dr. Nicole Carter arrived at the Willis Tower before most of the city had poured its first coffee. Her stride purposeful, her navy power suit a declaration of intent. No longer the confused guest of yesterday, she was the regional director of operations, stepping onto the 42nd floor of International Grandeur Holdings corporate headquarters. The sleek, modern office hummed with a quiet intensity, its panoramic windows overlooking a city that, much like herself, was waking up with a renewed sense of purpose. Vivian Sterling, Senior Vice President of Operations, met her at the elevator bank, her expression grave but appreciative. "Dr. Carter, thank you for coming in so promptly. We know this has been an ordeal." Nicole offered a curt, professional nod, her eyes sharp. "Vivian, there's no time to waste. I want this resolved quickly and decisively. For the company, and for everyone else Trevor Hamilton has wronged." Her voice was calm, but beneath the surface, a steel resolve vibrated, a promise of the reckoning to come. She was ready for battle. Vivian led Nicole into a large, high-tech conference room, the kind where corporate fates were decided. Spread across the polished table were legal pads, laptops, and a sense of palpable tension. 3 other executives rose as they entered. "Dr. Carter, allow me to introduce Martin Brooks, our head of legal, Jennifer Walsh, Director of Corporate Security, and Aisha Patel, our Director of Diversity and Inclusion." Each offered a handshake, their faces mirroring the serious concern that permeated the room. Martin, with his sharp suit and even sharper eyes, spoke first. "Dr. Carter, what happened to you was completely unacceptable. We are taking this with the utmost gravity." Jennifer, a woman whose calm demeanor belied an obvious competence, added, "Our security team is already pulling every angle of footage from last night. We'll have a clear picture very soon." Aisha Patel, an organizational psychologist with an empathetic gaze, nodded. "My department has been tracking certain trends. This incident, while egregious, unfortunately, fits a pattern we've observed at the Grand Meridian." Nicole felt a chill, a grim confirmation that her experience wasn't isolated. The pieces were starting to connect, and the picture was far uglier than a single isolated incident. Aisha Patel wasted no time. With a click, a bar graph bloomed onto the large screen at the head of the conference table, showing a disturbing upward trend. "In the past 18 months, she began, her voice measured but firm, we've received 12 documented complaints about discriminatory treatment at the Grand Meridian specifically, all from guests of color, and concerningly, all dismissed by local management as misunderstandings or guest error." She tapped a stylus on the screen, highlighting a particularly sharp spike. Nicole felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. 12. It wasn't just her. Trevor Hamilton wasn't just arrogant, he was presiding over a systemic problem. Vivian's jaw tightened, and Martin leaned forward, his legal pad already covered in furious notes. Jennifer's gaze hardened, confirming her security team's findings were likely aligning with Aisha's data. The room grew colder, filled with the grim realization that this was not merely a PR crisis, but a deep-seated ethical and potentially legal quagmire. The hidden truth of the Grand Meridian was finally being unveiled. Aisha clicked again, pulling up a series of internal reports. "Consistent denial," she stated, her voice tinged with professional frustration. Every incident was explained away, often with the same boilerplate language. Guest was confused. A simple booking error, misunderstanding of hotel policy. Trevor Hamilton personally signed off on many of these dismissals, often without any real investigation. She then pulled up another spreadsheet, displaying stark red numbers. And the cost? Conservatively, about $800,000 in direct bookings and potential lifetime value from these alienated guests. That's not including the immeasurable damage to our brand reputation, which, until yesterday, had been contained to anecdotal complaints. Nicole's jaw clenched. The Grand Meridian's supposed standards were not about excellence, but about exclusion, and it was bleeding the company dry. The casual dismissal of human dignity, disguised as upholding standards, now had a very tangible price tag. The financial impact was just as damning as the ethical one. Nicole leaned back in her chair, the pieces slotting into place with chilling clarity. Because Trevor Hamilton controls the narrative, she murmured, more to herself than the room, but everyone heard. Her gaze swept over the worried faces of the team. Local management investigates itself and finds no wrongdoing. It's a closed-loop system designed to bury complaints before they ever reach corporate oversight. Has created a culture where his prejudices are not only tolerated, but enforced by the very people under him, too afraid to speak up. Aisha nodded grimly. Exactly. Any dissent is immediately squashed. Employees are incentivized to maintain the Grand Meridian image, which, in practice, means ensuring a certain clientele feels welcome, and others don't. Nicole felt a surge of grim determination. This wasn't just about her. It was about dismantling a deeply ingrained system of bias that had been allowed to fester under Trevor's iron fist. This wasn't just a hotel. It was a microcosm of a larger societal problem, and she had the tools to fix it. Just as Nicole finished speaking, her phone buzzed with an incoming text. She glanced down, and her eyes narrowed. Harrison Blackwell, she announced, her voice laced with disgust. Has publicly praising Trevor, calling him a pillar of the community and commending his unwavering commitment to the Grand Meridian's elite standards regarding last night's incident. Martin Brooks slammed his hand lightly on the table. This is exactly what we feared. If this story gains traction on social media, before we control the narrative, especially with a figure like Blackwell backing Hamilton, we're looking at a nationwide boycott. Our brand could be irrevocably damaged. We need to get ahead of this immediately. The tension in the room spiked. The corporate battle was about to spill into the public arena, and International Grandeur Holdings was standing on the precipice of a full-blown PR nightmare. Nicole could feel the weight of it, but also the sharp edge of opportunity. Vivian clapped her hands, her voice snapping with decisive authority. All right, team, here's the plan. Jennifer, I want every minute of security footage from last night, from every angle. Pull all relevant employment records for Hamilton and anyone else involved. Martin, prepare the legal grounds for termination and any potential litigation from the guests has wronged. Aisha, continue compiling your data. We'll need it for the bias training program we'll be implementing. Nicole held up a hand. I want the security footage first. I want the staff interviews completed. I want everything documented and airtight before Trevor Hamilton has a chance to craft his narrative. We need to hit him with the full weight of the truth before he even knows what's coming. She looked at each of them, her gaze unwavering. We set the timeline. By tomorrow morning, I want an airtight case. He won't know what hit him until it's too late. The team nodded, a shared sense of urgency and determination filling the room. The clock was ticking, and the Grand Meridian's CEO was about to face a reckoning he never saw coming. The morning sun, usually a golden affirmation of his success, streamed through the panoramic windows of Trevor Hamilton's corner office at the Grand Meridian. He leaned back in his plush leather chair, a pristine white mug cradled in his hands, steam curling lazily from his artisanal coffee. On his desk, an open laptop displayed glowing revenue reports. The numbers were excellent, as always. Occupancy rates were up, guest satisfaction scores soared, and the recent quarterly projections were nothing short of stellar. This was his empire, meticulously built, impeccably managed. He took a slow sip, a faint, self-satisfied smile playing on his lips. This was the life. Untouchable. Unassailable. People in his position didn't just have jobs, they had legacies. He considered the minor kerfuffle from last night, some confused woman, easily handled. A testament to his staff's efficiency, really. The thought of any corporate storm brewing was utterly absurd. His phone, resting silently beside a stack of perfectly aligned documents, remained unbothered. Everything was exactly as it should be. Perfect. The quiet hum of the air conditioning was suddenly pierced by a soft, hesitant knock on his office door. Trevor barely glanced up, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Come in, Kelly." Kelly, his executive assistant, entered, her usual crisp demeanor replaced by a noticeable tension in her shoulders. She clutched a tablet, her knuckles white. "Sir, I apologize for interrupting, but there have been a number of urgent calls this morning." Trevor raised an eyebrow, a practiced air of dismissiveness. "Urgent? About what, Kelly? The Grand Meridian is running like a Swiss watch." Her gaze darted nervously to the side. "Yes, sir, of course. But 3 different departments have called, requesting immediate information about last night's incident in the lobby. Legal, corporate security, and even the executive operations office." She paused, taking a shallow breath. "And sir, they specifically asked about Dr. Nicole Carter." The name hung in the air like a discordant note. Trevor's brow furrowed, a faint, unfamiliar unease fluttering in his stomach. Dr. Nicole Carter. The woman he'd so confidently dismissed. He hadn't thought about her since. "Dr. Carter?" he repeated, the words feeling foreign, unwelcome. Why would they be asking about her? His voice was sharper than intended. Kelly just shook her head, wide-eyed. "Pull up her fraudulent reservation details," he commanded, the unease hardening into suspicion. Kelly returned minutes later, her face even paler. She didn't meet Trevor's gaze. "Sir, I have the information you requested about Dr. Carter's reservation." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Well, out with it, Kelly," Trevor snapped, his irritation warring with a growing sense of dread. "Just confirm what we already know. Fraudulent. Case closed." Kelly swallowed hard. "Marcus Thorne, the front desk manager. He double-checked it after you left last night, sir. Just to be sure." She paused, and the silence in the opulent office stretched, thick and suffocating. "Sir, it appears the number was legitimate. It matched our corporate booking format exactly. And it was booked through the executive access portal. For VIPs. The words hit Trevor like a physical blow. His coffee mug, forgotten, clattered against the polished desk. Legitimate? Executive access portal? His mind reeled. Marcus, the quiet, efficient Marcus, had verified it. After he had dismissed the woman, after he had called security, his eyes widened, a cold, dawning horror spreading through him. The calm, authoritative woman in the lobby, her piercing gaze, her unwavering confidence. It all clicked into place, a horrifying, sickening realization. Trevor pushed back from his desk, the chair scraping loudly on the marble floor. The sound was jarring, a sharp contrast to the sudden, deafening silence in his mind. Executive access codes, he'd seen them himself, reserved for the highest echelons of International Grandeur Holdings, the very corporate entity he served. Corporate calling to ask specific questions about her, not just one department, but 3. Legal, security, executive operations. And the confidence in her voice, that quiet, unshakable certainty when she insisted her reservation was real. He remembered the name on the screen from last night's briefing, Dr. Nicole Carter, the new regional director of operations. He'd dismissed it as a coincidence, a mistaken identity, a fleeting thought he'd swatted away like a fly. But now, it wasn't a coincidence. It was her. The woman he had personally, publicly, and arrogantly thrown out of his hotel. His stomach lurched, a wave of nausea washing over him. The Grand Meridian wasn't his kingdom anymore. It was a glass house, and he had just shattered its foundation. Panic clawed at his throat, cold and sharp. His world, so meticulously ordered, was collapsing around him. Trevor stumbled to his office window. The gleaming city skyline, usually a symbol of his dominion, now seemed to mock him. He stared down at the Grand Meridian lobby, a miniature world below, where just last night he had played the role of the righteous king. He could almost see the spot where he'd stood, imperious, dismissing Dr. Nicole Carter. The memory burned with a fresh, agonizing shame. For the first time since becoming CEO, since ascending to the pinnacle of his self-made world, he felt a cold touch of genuine fear. Not the fear of failure, but the terror of irreversible, humiliating exposure. A shrill, insistent ring cut through the silence of his office. He flinched, his head snapping towards his desk. His phone vibrated, its screen glowing with a single damning line: International Grandeur Holdings, Executive Office. His hand, usually steady and commanding, trembled as he reached for it. Each ring echoed like a death knell in the vast, suddenly empty space of his office. The serene city view blurred, replaced by the terrifying certainty that his reign was over. Trevor cleared his throat, trying to summon an air of professionalism, but his voice came out strained, barely a croak. "Hamilton here." The voice on the other end was cool, crisp, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Mr. Hamilton, this is Vivian Sterling, Senior Vice President of Operations for International Grandeur Holdings." There was a pause, a beat of chilling silence that stretched Trevor's nerves taut. "I believe we need to discuss last night's incident involving Dr. Nicole Carter." Trevor's heart hammered against his ribs. "Miss Sterling, good morning." "Yes, a minor issue with a guest and a fraudulent reservation. It was handled swiftly and professionally, I assure you." He tried to sound confident, but his words felt hollow, already crumbling under the weight of her cold authority. He could almost feel her unyielding gaze through the phone. "Minor issue?" Vivian's voice was like ice. "Mr. Hamilton, Dr. Carter is our newly appointed Regional Director of Operations. Her reservation was legitimate, booked directly through our executive portal. She was at your property for her initial assessment, a crucial part of her onboarding." Her tone left no room for doubt or argument. Trevor swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. The air in his office felt impossibly thin. I understand there was a misunderstanding," Trevor stammered, frantically searching for an excuse, any excuse. "The front desk indicated the reservation wasn't in the system at first. I was simply protecting the hotel's integrity." Vivian's voice remained unyielding. "Are you telling me, Mr. Hamilton, that you personally removed a guest from your property based on the assumption that her reservation was fraudulent, without proper verification?" Trevor's mind raced. He couldn't lie. Not now. Not to Vivian Sterling. No. I trusted my staff's initial assessment. And you didn't think to verify it yourself or instruct your front desk manager, Marcus Thorne, who was standing right there, to double-check using the corporate access system. Her questions were sharp, precise, like surgical instruments dissecting his negligence. Trevor's face felt hot, then cold. He remembered Marcus, looking vaguely uncomfortable. He remembered dismissing him with a wave of his hand. "Mr. Hamilton?" Vivian pressed, her voice unwavering. He gripped the phone tighter, sweat beading on his forehead. I was focused on maintaining the guest experience for our other patrons," he mumbled, the excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. He could feel his carefully constructed world crumbling, brick by brick. His arrogance, his dismissiveness, it was all laid bare. He had no defense. "Mr. Hamilton," Vivian's voice cut through his panicked thoughts, chilling him to the bone. "We have confirmed that Dr. Carter's reservation was entirely legitimate. It was booked directly through the Executive Access portal, specifically for her arrival as the new Regional Director of Operations for International Grandeur Holdings. Effective immediately." Trevor's breath hitched. Effective immediately. The words echoed with a terrifying finality. He had not just inconvenienced a guest, he had humiliated a senior executive, his own boss, on her very first day. The irony was a bitter, metallic taste in his mouth. Vivian's next words delivered the final, crushing blow. Her voice, though still calm, held an edge of professional disdain. "Mr. Hamilton, exactly who do you think Dr. Nicole Carter is?" Trevor's mind went blank. The phone felt heavy in his trembling hand. He couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. He could only stare at his reflection in the dark glass of the window, a man stripped bare, utterly defeated. His empire, his kingdom, had vanished in a single prejudiced act. The silence that followed was the sound of his world collapsing. The phone clattered from his hand, hitting the desk with a dull thud. He sank into his chair, eyes wide and unseeing, the silence of the room a testament to his total defeat. The monitoring room on the 42nd floor of Willis Tower hummed with the quiet efficiency of high-stakes corporate surveillance. Dr. Nicole Carter sat beside Aisha Patel, her eyes fixed on the large, high-definition screen dominating the wall. On it, the previous evening's drama unfolded in crisp, unsettling clarity. The opulent Grand Meridian lobby, the bustling guests, and then the arrival of Nicole herself, followed by the concierge, and finally, Trevor Hamilton. Nicole watched, a grim satisfaction settling over her. "Pause it right there," she instructed, her voice calm but firm. The image froze, Trevor caught mid-stride, his gaze sweeping over the scene at the concierge desk, his eyes landing on Nicole. "Look at his body language," Nicole continued, pointing at the frozen image. "See how his shoulders tighten, how his jaw clenches? Before I even opened my mouth, before he even knew what was happening, he'd already made a judgment. That dismissive tilt of his head, the way he squared his shoulders, he's not approaching to help. He's approaching to exert control and to confirm a preconceived notion." Aisha leaned closer, her analytical mind absorbing every nuance. "You're right," she murmured. "There's a subtle shift in his posture, a rigidity. It's the instant categorization we discussed. He saw what he expected to see, not what was actually there. His subconscious had already decided you didn't belong." Nicole nodded, a wave of vindication washing over her. To see it, irrefutably on screen, validated every gut feeling, every quiet humiliation she'd felt. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a judgment. And now, they had the visual proof. The silence in the room was heavy, filled with the undeniable truth of a prejudice caught in the act. Aisha Patel adjusted her glasses, her fingers flying across a tablet, pulling up more data. "And this wasn't an isolated incident for Mr. Hamilton," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion, purely factual. "This instant categorization, a common manifestation of implicit bias, is a pattern we've observed throughout his career, not just at the Grand Meridian." Nicole turned, her brow furrowed. "You mean this has happened before?" "Oh, yes," Aisha confirmed, a timeline appearing on the large screen, charting Trevor's executive positions across various luxury properties. "At each hotel, we found similar patterns. A disproportionate number of complaints from minority guests, often dismissed internally as guest misunderstandings, or isolated incidents of rudeness, not discrimination. His employment records show a consistent reputation for maintaining exclusivity and a rigorous standard of clientele, which, when cross-referenced with demographic data, tell a very different story." Aisha scrolled down, highlighting specific entries. At the St. Regis in Miami, 3 separate incidents involving Black and Hispanic guests being denied entry to the executive lounge or having their reservations inexplicably lost. At the Peninsula in Beverly Hills, a highly publicized, though ultimately settled, lawsuit from an Asian American couple who were refused a suite they'd booked, only for it to be given to a white couple who arrived moments later. Trevor Hamilton consistently stood by his staff, denying any wrongdoing, citing vague standards of conduct or dress code. Nicole felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "So he's been doing this for years," she said, the realization heavy in her voice. "And it's gone unchallenged because he's always managed to spin it as upholding the brand." "Precisely," Aisha replied, her gaze unwavering. "He's a master at masking prejudice under the guise of luxury standards." Until now, there was no one with the authority or the direct experience to truly challenge that narrative within the company. Aisha's eyes, usually so focused on data, softened slightly as she looked at Nicole. "Speaking of challenging narratives, Dr. Carter, I took the liberty of looking into your academic background. Your master's thesis caught my eye. Nicole blinked, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. My thesis? That was years ago. Indeed, Aisha confirmed, a faint smile touching her lips. The screen shifted from Trevor's career timeline to a digital rendering of a thesis cover page, emblazoned with the title, Implicit Bias in Luxury Hospitality, Strategies for Fostering Inclusive Environments in High-End Service Industries. Nicole stared at the screen, a profound sense of irony washing over her. Years ago, in her academic pursuit, she had meticulously researched and articulated the very systemic issues that had just played out in her own life. She had written about the subtle cues, the unchecked assumptions, the corrosive effect of unacknowledged bias on both guests and the corporate bottom line. She had even proposed solutions, actionable frameworks for training and accountability. You wrote about exactly what happened to you, Aisha stated, her voice quiet. And more importantly, you wrote about how to fix it. Nicole's mind raced, a montage of late nights in the library, endless drafts and passionate debates with her professors flashing before her eyes. The frustration of theoretical solutions meeting real-world resistance. And now, here she was, living the very problem she had sought to solve, a problem that had ignored her academic warnings. Yet, there was also a surge of fierce vindication. The pain of the past evening, the humiliation, suddenly felt purposeful. It wasn't just about her, it was about every person, every guest, every employee who had ever been dismissed or devalued by a system she already understood and had already designed a way to dismantle. Her expertise wasn't just theoretical, it was now the very weapon in her hand. The door to the monitoring room burst open, and Jennifer Walsh, head of corporate security, strode in, her face alight with a mixture of shock and triumph. In her hands, she clutched a stack of thick, meticulously organized binders, their pages overflowing with documents. "You are not going to believe this," Jennifer announced, her voice barely containing her excitement. She deposited the binders onto a nearby table with a resounding thud, causing Nicole and Aisha to jump. Vivian Sterling and Martin Brooks, having just joined, exchanged bewildered glances. "Marcus Thorne," Jennifer gasped, out of breath but radiating energy. He kept records, personal, meticulous records of every single incident involving minority guests over the past 2 years. 47 documented cases, complete with dates, times, brief summaries, and Trevor's dismissive responses. Nicole's eyes widened. 47. The number hit her like a physical blow. It was far worse than the 12 Aisha had initially identified through formal complaints. This was an internal, hidden history of discrimination, painstakingly compiled. He was planning to file an EEOC complaint, Jennifer continued, her voice dropping slightly, now laced with awe. He'd even made copies and sent them, anonymously, to other department heads within the Grand Meridian, hoping someone, anyone, would eventually listen. Martin Brooks, the legal counsel, picked up one of the binders, his expression grim as he flipped through the pages. This is irrefutable," he murmured. "This is the smoking gun. This isn't just a pattern. It's a systemic, deliberate disregard for corporate policy and basic human decency, and it's been documented from the inside." Aisha let out a slow breath. 47 cases. And Marcus, the front desk manager, he was the one who was at the desk last night, wasn't he? The one who looked so uncomfortable. Nicole nodded, a flicker of understanding passing between them. The implications were staggering. Jennifer nodded vigorously. "Yes, Marcus. He's been working there for 5 years. He told my team he felt sick every time Trevor dismissed a complaint, but he was afraid to speak up. He saw how Trevor retaliated against anyone who questioned him, but he kept record. He said he kept hoping someone from corporate would finally come and see what was happening." Nicole felt a surge of emotion, anger at the injustice, but also a profound respect for Marcus's quiet bravery. He had been a silent resistor, clinging to hope in a toxic environment. He said, Jennifer continued, her voice softening, that when Dr. Carter stood her ground last night, when she refused to be dismissed quietly, it was the first time he'd ever seen Trevor Hamilton look truly scared. And for the first time in 2 years, Marcus felt hope. The room fell silent, the weight of that statement hanging in the air. It wasn't just about numbers or legal exposure anymore. It was about the people, the staff who had been forced to witness and sometimes participate in the hotel's discriminatory practices, silently longing for change. Vivian Sterling, who had been listening intently, finally spoke. Her voice was resolute. This changes everything. We don't just have evidence, we have witnesses. We have an internal narrative that corroborates every external complaint. The staff, the very heart of that hotel, is ready for a change. They're waiting for us. Nicole looked at her team, a fierce determination hardening her gaze. The game had changed. They weren't just investigating, they were liberating. And tomorrow morning, when she walked back into the Grand Meridian, she wouldn't just be a regional director. She would be the embodiment of the hope Marcus and his colleagues had been waiting for. The reckoning was no longer just about Trevor. It was about setting things right for an entire institution. The grand, opulent lobby of the Grand Meridian Hotel, usually a bustling hub of refined elegance, seemed to hold its breath. Afternoon light, usually filtered and soft, now felt stark, illuminating every polished surface. Dr. Nicole Carter entered, her stride calm and deliberate, a stark contrast to her hurried, humiliated exit less than 24 hours prior. Flanking her were Vivian Sterling, Martin Brooks, and Jennifer Walsh, a formidable phalanx of corporate authority. Their presence was a silent, powerful declaration. As they moved across the marble floor, the subtle murmurs of guests and the hushed efficiency of the staff slowly died away. Heads turned. Concierge staff, bellhops, and front desk agents froze mid-task. Marcus Thorne, at the concierge desk, was the first to recognize her, his eyes widening in a complex mix of shock, fear, and a flicker of something almost like relief. A ripple of recognition, then apprehension, then outright terror, washed over the faces of the staff as they realized exactly who had just walked back into their lives. Vivian Sterling, her voice cutting through the sudden, stunned silence with professional crispness, announced, "Good afternoon. This is Vivian Sterling, Senior Vice President of Operations for International Grandeur Holdings. We're here for an unscheduled operational review." The words hung in the air, a death knell for the complacent atmosphere. Nicole's gaze swept the room, meeting the eyes of the staff she had quietly observed the night before. This was not just a review, it was a reckoning. Miles above the lobby, in his lavish corner office, Trevor Hamilton sat perfectly still behind his imposing desk. His morning coffee had long gone cold, untouched. His eyes, wide and bloodshot, stared blankly at the polished mahogany, then drifted to the array of awards gleaming on his credenza. Plaques, trophies, framed articles praising his visionary leadership. They looked like mocking relics now, hollow symbols of a pride that had just shattered into a million pieces. The only sound in the cavernous room was the frantic, muffled tapping of Kelly's keyboard from the outer office, a nervous rhythm that felt like a countdown. Then, her voice, tight with barely contained panic, broke the silence. "Sir, they're here. Dr. Carter is here, sir, with corporate executives, the entire executive team." Trevor didn't respond, didn't move a muscle. His breath hitched, a dry, rasping sound. His mind, usually a fortress of arrogant certainty, was now a crumbling ruin, besieged by the full weight of his mistake. He saw the Grand Meridian lobby in his mind's eye, the woman he had dismissed, humiliated, and had security remove. He saw her face, her eyes. He knew now. He knew exactly who she was. The sound of approaching footsteps, slow and deliberate, grew louder, echoing in the sudden cavernous silence of his office. His reign, he knew, was over. The heavy oak doors of Trevor Hamilton's office swung open, not with a subservient knock, but with a deliberate, unhurried push. Dr. Nicole Carter stepped in first, her presence commanding, yet utterly calm. She wore a tailored suit that seemed to absorb the light, a silent counterpoint to the glittering opulence of Trevor's domain. Their eyes met across the vast expanse of the office, her gaze steady, unwavering, holding the full weight of the previous night's humiliation and the dawning power of her return. Trevor, still frozen behind his desk, visibly flinched, shrinking infinitesimally in his large leather chair. Nicole's gaze swept the room, taking in the panoramic city views, the expensive art, the awards that had once symbolized Trevor's untouchable success. It was the kingdom he had so proudly surveyed, the stage for his arrogance. Now she was standing in the center of it, not as a confused guest, but as an undeniable force. Vivian Sterling stepped forward, her voice a cool blade. "Mr. Hamilton," she stated, her tone devoid of warmth or pleasantries, "I believe you've met Dr. Carter." Trevor could only manage a strangled cough, a pathetic, almost inaudible sound. The power had shifted, irrevocably, and everyone in the room felt it. Vivian Sterling wasted no time. With a dismissive gesture that underscored the new power dynamic, she instructed, "Mr. Hamilton, please sit." Trevor, already seated but feeling as though he was standing on shaky ground, could only nod mutely, his hands clenching white-knuckled on the arms of his chair. Martin Brooks, the head of legal, stepped forward, his expression grave. He carried a thick, imposing folder, its contents clearly bulging with documentation. He placed it with a decisive thud on Trevor's pristine desk, the sound echoing ominously in the suddenly silent room. The corporate executives stood in a semicircle, their faces unreadable, their postures radiating an unyielding, professional severity. "Mr. Hamilton," Martin began, his voice devoid of emotion, "we're here to discuss the incident that occurred in your lobby last evening, involving Dr. Nicole Carter." He paused, allowing the weight of the words to settle. Trevor swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He tried to meet Martin's gaze, but his eyes kept darting nervously to Nicole, who stood slightly behind the others, a quiet, unwavering presence. The formal reckoning had begun, and Trevor, for the first time in his life, felt utterly exposed. Trevor, attempting to regain some semblance of control, cleared his throat. "Look, I understand there was some confusion last night with Dr. Carter's reservation. A misunderstanding, really. My staff," Nicole's voice, calm yet sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, cut him off. She turned slowly from the window, her gaze fixed directly on him. "There was no confusion, Mr. Hamilton. My reservation was legitimate, confirmed directly through corporate channels. You chose to assume otherwise." Her words, delivered without anger, simply as unassailable fact, hit him like a physical blow. His face, already pale, drained further of color. "Tell me, Mr. Hamilton," Nicole continued, her voice gaining a quiet, piercing intensity. "How do you determine which guests deserve respectful treatment? Is it based on their name, their appearance, or perhaps whether they look like the kind of person you expect to see in the Grand Meridian lobby?" Trevor stammered, searching for a response, but found none. He looked utterly flustered, trapped, and speechless. His attempts to frame this as a minor incident were being meticulously dismantled, piece by devastating piece. Trevor desperately tried to find an escape route, a way to deflect the pointed accusation. "Dr. Carter, I assure you, it was a simple oversight. I had no idea who you were. If I had known—" Nicole's eyes narrowed, her voice cutting him off again, precise and unwavering. "If you had known I was a corporate executive, you would have treated me differently, wouldn't you, Mr. Hamilton?" He squirmed, caught in the trap of his own words. "Well, naturally, the protocol for a senior executive would be different." "Exactly," Nicole stated, her voice devoid of triumph, but heavy with the weight of his admission. "So your standards aren't about universal excellence, are they? They're about selective judgment. They're about who you deem worthy of respect, based on factors that have nothing to do with a legitimate reservation. Trevor opened his mouth, then closed it, his jaw working uselessly. He had no defense, no argument that could withstand the unyielding logic of her statement. The hypocrisy of his entire operation was laid bare, not by an angry outburst, but by Nicole's calm, undeniable truth. Vivian Sterling stepped forward, her voice flat and formal. And this selective judgment, Mr. Hamilton, seems to be a consistent pattern. Martin, if you would. Martin Brooks opened the thick folder on Trevor's desk. The sheer volume of paper, neatly organized into tabbed sections, was intimidating. Mr. Hamilton, Vivian continued, in the past 18 months, this property has received 47 documented complaints regarding discriminatory treatment of minority guests. Trevor's eyes widened, his voice cracking. 47? That's impossible. We investigate every complaint. We handle them internally. There must be a mistake. Martin's voice was dry. No mistake, Mr. Hamilton. Each one meticulously recorded. Would you like me to read them to you? We can start with the Johnson family, who were denied a prepaid suite because their vibe didn't match the Grand Meridian ambience. As your front desk manager, a Mr. Peterson, wrote in his report. He began to flip through the pages, the rustling of paper a cruel counterpoint to Trevor's rising panic. Trevor's face drained of all colour, his eyes fixed on the growing stack of evidence, each page a nail in his coffin. Jennifer Walsh, the head of corporate security, stepped forward. Beyond the documented complaints, Mr. Hamilton, our interviews with your staff have provided some very interesting insights into your management style, particularly regarding how these complaints were handled internally. Her gaze was unwavering, hinting at secrets revealed and loyalties broken. Nicole then spoke, her voice quieter now, but no less impactful. Marcus Thorne, your front desk manager, mentioned something interesting. He said he tried to verify my reservation through the central system after our encounter last night. He actually found it quite easily. Why didn't you ask him to do that during our conversation, Mr. Hamilton? Trevor stammered, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. I was busy. It was a chaotic moment. I trusted my staff's initial assessment. His words sounded hollow, even to himself. Nicole merely watched him, her expression unreadable, letting his feeble excuses hang in the air. Jennifer exchanged a knowing glance with Vivian. Trevor's negligence, bordering on deliberate blindness, was being systematically exposed, piece by damning piece, by the very people he had dismissed or overseen. Trevor, desperate, finally resorted to the worn-out defense. Look, I admit, it was an error in judgment, a bad call on my part. I apologize for that. Nicole's voice was calm, almost conversational, as she repeated his words. An error in judgment. Mr. Hamilton, do you believe that error was influenced by my race? The question hung heavy in the air, a direct challenge. Trevor recoiled as if struck. No, absolutely not, he blurted out, his voice rising in panic. I don't see color, Dr. Carter. I believe in merit, in standards. Everyone is treated the same here. He puffed out his chest, trying to project a defiance he didn't feel. Nicole exchanged a subtle glance with Vivian, a shared acknowledgement of the predictable, yet utterly transparent denial. The classic line, the ultimate defense of those who refuse to acknowledge their own biases. But Nicole was prepared to dismantle it. Nicole held his gaze, a faint, almost imperceptible tilt to her head. You don't see color? Mr. Hamilton, that's a fascinating claim, especially given the 47 documented complaints we just discussed, all from guests of color, all dismissed under your leadership. She paused, letting the silence amplify the weight of her words. So she continued, her voice cutting through his flimsy denial with surgical precision. When you looked at me in your lobby last night, you saw exactly the same thing you would have seen if I were a white woman in a business suit with a legitimate reservation. Is that what you're telling us, Mr. Hamilton? That your error in judgment would have been precisely the same, regardless of my skin color? Trevor's jaw went slack. His eyes, wide and terrified, darted from Nicole to Vivian, then to Martin, then back to Nicole. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. The air seemed to leave his lungs. He was trapped, utterly defeated by the unassailable logic of her question. His "I don't see color" defense, the shield he had hidden behind for years, had been shattered into a million pieces. The silence that followed was deafening, the sound of a man's world collapsing around him. A heavy silence descended upon Trevor Hamilton's opulent office, a stark contrast to the buzzing energy that usually defined his domain. Every eye in the room, from the unwavering gazes of Vivian Sterling, Martin Brooks, and Jennifer Walsh, was fixed on Trevor. He sat rigidly behind his desk, a man frozen in time, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. The speakerphone on the polished mahogany surface hummed faintly, a conduit to the unseen, unyielding power of International Grandeur Holdings' executive board. Then, a voice cut through the stillness. Montgomery, the chairman of the board, his tone devoid of emotion, clipped and resolute. "Mr. Hamilton," he began, each word a hammer blow, "the board has reviewed all evidence pertaining to the incident of last evening, as well as the comprehensive findings of the internal audit team regarding your operational oversight. Our decision is unanimous." Trevor swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. He tried to speak, but no sound escaped. His eyes, once gleaming with self-assurance, were wide with a growing terror. He watched Vivian, her expression unreadable, and Dr. Carter, who stood by the window, her back mostly to him, a silent, powerful presence. Montgomery continued, "Effective immediately, you are terminated for cause from your position as CEO of the Grand Meridian Hotel. Your employment is concluded without severance, and the non-compete clause in your contract will remain in full effect." The words hung in the air, cold and undeniable. No severance, no golden parachute. The very thought, for a man who had equated his worth with his wealth, was a physical blow. Trevor's carefully constructed world, built on privilege and unchecked ego, was collapsing around him. "Your actions haven't just harmed Dr. Carter, Mr. Hamilton," Montgomery articulated, his voice gaining a chilling edge. "They've damaged our brand, cost us revenue, and exposed us to significant legal liability. This company will not tolerate discrimination, nor will it tolerate the deliberate suppression of complaints that threaten our integrity and our standing in the global hospitality market. This decision is final." Trevor's face, which had been pale, now seemed to crumble. His meticulously groomed hair suddenly felt disheveled, his expensive suit a costume. He was no longer the untouchable CEO, but a man stripped bare, exposed for his casual cruelty and profound negligence. He looked around the room, a desperate, pleading look in his eyes, but found no sympathy, only the cold, professional finality of a reckoning long overdue. The silence returned, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by Trevor's ragged breathing and the faint hum of the speakerphone. He expected the call to end, for the hammer to fall completely. But Montgomery's voice returned, this time with a new, almost clinical energy. It was a shift from judgment to a declaration of the future, a future built on the very principles Trevor had so carelessly violated. "Furthermore, Mr. Hamilton," Montgomery stated, his tone firm, "International Grandeur Holdings is committed to ensuring that such an incident never occurs again at any of our properties. To that end, the board has approved the immediate implementation of a comprehensive, company-wide diversity and inclusion initiative." Trevor, who had slumped in his chair, head bowed, snapped his gaze up. His eyes, still wide with shock and despair, found Dr. Nicole Carter. She had turned from the window now, her profile sharp, her expression calm and resolute. He saw a faint, almost imperceptible nod from her, a quiet acknowledgement of what was being said. Montgomery continued, his voice ringing with authority. "This initiative will include a mandatory, extensive bias training program designed and developed by our new Regional Director of Operations, Dr. Nicole Carter. This program will be rolled out across all International Grandeur Holdings properties globally within the next 60 days. The words hit Trevor with a sickening thud, a fresh wave of humiliation washing over him. Not only had he been stripped of his title, his wealth, and his status, but the very woman he had so arrogantly dismissed was now spearheading the corporate reform. Her vision, her expertise, her very presence was now being mandated across the entire organization he had once lorded over. The irony was a bitter, metallic taste in his mouth. He looked at Nicole again, his mind reeling. Her program, her principles. He had spent years ridiculing such initiatives, seeing them as frivolous, unnecessary, a drain on resources. He had dismissed entire groups of people, not just from his hotel, but from his very consciousness. And now, his downfall was directly paving the way for the triumph of the values he had scorned. It was a poetic, brutal form of justice. Nicole met his gaze for a fleeting moment. There was no malice in her eyes, no gloating, only a quiet, determined vindication. She wasn't celebrating his ruin. She was simply acknowledging the dawn of a new era, an era she was ushering in. The future of International Grandeur Holdings, the legacy he had squandered, was now firmly in her capable hands. The board had spoken, not just to punish him, but to affirm her. The finality of the announcement hung heavy in the air. Montgomery's voice faded, and Vivian Sterling, stepping forward, addressed Trevor directly. Her tone, though professional, held an unwavering coldness that matched the board's verdict. "Mr. Hamilton, you have precisely 1 hour to clear your personal belongings from this office. A corporate security escort will be waiting outside to ensure your departure from the premises." Trevor's head snapped up, his eyes darting between Vivian and the closed office door. An escort, the ultimate indignity. His mind raced, searching for an argument, a plea, anything to soften the blow, but there was nothing. No leverage, no escape. His empire had crumbled to dust. He could feel the eyes of Martin Brooks and Jennifer Walsh on him, their expressions impassive, like stone statues observing a fallen monument. He rose slowly, unsteadily, from his chair, his movements stiff and disjointed. His gaze fell upon the awards that lined his shelves, the framed photos of triumphant moments, the vast cityscape beyond his window, symbols of a power that was no longer his. They mocked him now, glittering reminders of his monumental fall. As he shuffled towards the door, Vivian stepped slightly aside, allowing him a direct path. Dr. Nicole Carter, who had remained by the window, now moved, positioning herself near the exit, her presence an unavoidable obstacle in his retreat. Trevor paused, his shoulders slumped, unable to meet her gaze directly. He mumbled something inaudible, perhaps a half-hearted apology, perhaps just a sound of his own despair. Nicole's voice, calm and clear, cut through his haze. It wasn't loud, but it resonated with an authority that Trevor now recognized and, for the first time in his life, truly respected. "Mr. Hamilton," she began, her tone measured, "I hope someday you understand that this isn't about punishing you." He flinched, a fresh wave of shame washing over him. He braced himself for a final, cutting remark. But her words were not designed to inflict more pain. They were meant to educate, to leave a lasting impression of purpose beyond personal retribution. "It's about protecting everyone who comes after you," Nicole continued, her gaze firm, unwavering. "Protecting the guests who walk through the Grand Meridian's doors, regardless of their background. Protecting the employees who deserve to work in an environment free from prejudice. And protecting the integrity of a brand that promises excellence to all." Trevor finally met her eyes. There was no triumph in hers, but a quiet, profound conviction. He saw the enormity of what she was saying, the systemic change she championed, a change his own arrogance had made necessary. He saw the countless faces he had dismissed, the policies he had ignored, the people he had hurt. The words echoed in his mind, stripping away the last vestiges of his self-justification. This wasn't about him. It was about something far larger, far more significant. He was just a catalyst for change, inadvertently. With a heavy sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his entire collapsed world, Trevor Hamilton turned and walked out of his office, the door closing softly behind him, leaving behind the silence, the corporate team, and the woman who had brought about his reckoning. The heavy oak door of his former office clicked shut behind him, a sound that echoed like a final, definitive period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. Trevor Hamilton stood in the opulent hallway, the polished marble reflecting the expensive artwork and gleaming light fixtures around him. This was the same hallway he had strutted through countless times, radiating confidence, a king in his castle. Now it felt like a cold, empty corridor leading to nowhere. He took a few disoriented steps, his legs feeling like lead. The security guard, a burly man named Frank, whom Trevor had barked orders at for years, stood impassively a few feet away, a silent, watchful sentinel. Frank's presence was a stark reminder of his new reality. He was no longer a revered CEO, but a former employee, escorted from the premises like a common criminal. The weight of it all pressed down on him. The loss of his title, his immense salary, his reputation, his carefully curated life of luxury. But deeper than that, a chilling realization had begun to set in, brought into sharp focus by Nicole's parting words and the brutal honesty of the board's verdict. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had been fundamentally, profoundly wrong. He had judged, dismissed, and humiliated a woman based on assumptions rooted in prejudice, and that prejudice had cost him everything. His chest tightened, a burning sensation clawing at his throat. He leaned against the cool, unforgiving marble wall, his hands instinctively coming up to cover his face. He felt a tremor start in his shoulders, then spread through his entire body. And then the tears came. They weren't the quiet, dignified tears he might have shed over a professional setback years ago. These were ragged, guttural sobs, torn from the depths of his being. He wept for the loss of his career, the dreams he had nurtured, the image he had cultivated. But more profoundly, he wept for the man he had become. He wept for the arrogance that had blinded him, the implicit biases he had indulged, the casual cruelty he had inflicted without a second thought. He wept for the 47 people and countless others whose experiences he had dismissed, whose humanity he had overlooked. The Grand Meridian, his kingdom, was no longer his. The city skyline outside the window, usually a symbol of his power, now seemed to mock him with its indifferent expanse. He was a broken man, stripped bare in the cold, impersonal hallway of the very building that had once been his fortress. The sound of his own ragged breathing and muffled sobs was the only sound in the vast, silent corridor. This was rock bottom. This was the profound despair that precedes, if one is lucky, a chance at true transformation. The grand, sweeping view of the Chicago skyline that once symbolized Trevor Hamilton's unchecked power now served a different master. Dr. Nicole Carter sat at the head of the conference table in what used to be Trevor's opulent corner office, the vast space now repurposed into a bustling command center. Charts and graphs detailing progress on diversity and inclusion initiatives adorned the walls, a stark contrast to the old revenue reports. Nicole, poised and focused, oversaw the initial stages of the Grand Meridian's transformation. Around her, the corporate team moved with a new, invigorated purpose. Aisha Patel, Director of Diversity and Inclusion, was deeply immersed in refining the comprehensive bias training modules, her screen filled with flowcharts and psychological frameworks. Jennifer Walsh from Corporate Security, now also acting as an interim operations liaison, coordinated the systematic review of hotel policies, her phone constantly buzzing with updates. Across the room, Vivian Sterling, perpetually calm under pressure, expertly fielded media inquiries, ensuring the narrative remained one of proactive corporate responsibility. The air hummed with purposeful efficiency, a symphony of professionals dedicated to rebuilding. This was the hero taking charge, rebuilding not just a hotel, but a culture. Nicole leaned back, observing the controlled chaos, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over her. Aisha approached her, a thoughtful frown on her face. "Dr. Carter," she began, "we have 17 employees who've come forward, admitting varying degrees of complicity in perpetuating the old culture. How do you want to handle them?" Nicole's gaze was steady, her voice calm but firm. "Mandatory bias training for everyone, Aisha. No exceptions. It's about education, not just punishment." She paused, considering. "Those who participated willingly, but now show genuine remorse and a desire for change, they get written warnings and a chance to prove themselves. We'll monitor their progress closely." She tapped a pen lightly on the table. "But for those who documented problems, like Marcus, who quietly resisted the old regime, they get commendations, and more than that, they get advancement opportunities. We need to foster a culture where integrity is rewarded, not suppressed. We're building a new foundation, and those who stood for what was right are its cornerstone." Aisha nodded, a subtle smile of approval on her face as she looked at the document outlining the new HR policy. Just as Aisha turned to implement Nicole's directives, Nicole's personal cell phone, usually reserved for close contacts, buzzed on the table. The name on the screen was unfamiliar. Rebecca Hamilton. Nicole's brow furrowed slightly in a puzzled expression. Trevor Hamilton's ex-wife? What could she possibly want? Aisha, catching the unusual name, raised an eyebrow, a silent question in her eyes. Nicole hesitated for a moment, then answered, putting the call on speaker, a subtle nod to Aisha. "Dr. Carter." Rebecca's voice came through, strained and hesitant, tinged with a raw desperation. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, and I completely understand if you hang up. But could we meet? There's something I think you should know about Trevor. Something that might change things. Not about him getting his job back, but about him." Nicole's expression remained unreadable, a blend of surprise and caution. This was an unexpected twist, a potential shift in the narrative from pure justice to something far more complex. The intrigue was undeniable. The Grind coffee shop on Jackson Street was a cozy, slightly worn place, a stark contrast to the opulent Grand Meridian. Nicole sat at a small table, her sharp professional attire a counterpoint to the tired, unpolished woman sitting opposite her. Rebecca Hamilton looked as though she hadn't slept properly in weeks, her eyes shadowed, her usually neat hair a little disheveled. "Thank you for meeting me, Dr. Carter," Rebecca began, her voice a low murmur. Nicole met her gaze directly, her posture firm. "Miss Hamilton, I want to be clear that nothing you tell me will change what happened. Your ex-husband discriminated against me and 46 other guests based on race. He violated corporate policy and deeply damaged the company's reputation. That can't be excused." Her voice was devoid of malice, but resolute. "My purpose here is to ensure justice was served and that such incidents never happen again within International Grandeur Holdings. I agreed to meet out of curiosity, nothing more." Rebecca nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to her hands clasped on the table. "I understand," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I wouldn't ask you to excuse it. I wouldn't excuse it myself. But there's a part of the story you don't know, a side of Trevor that, well, it exists. Or at least it used to." Rebecca pulled out her phone, her thumb swiping to a photo. She turned the screen to Nicole. It was a picture of a bright-eyed girl, no older than 10, with a gap-toothed smile. "This is Sophie, our daughter," Rebecca explained, her voice softening. "She's devastated. She doesn't understand why her dad is suddenly gone. Not just from his job, but from himself." Nicole looked at the child's innocent face, a flicker of something akin to pity stirring within her, though she quickly suppressed it. "What does this have to do with anything, Miss Hamilton?" she asked, her tone still cautious. Rebecca sighed, a deep, weary sound. "Trevor wasn't always like this, Dr. Carter. When we met, he was ambitious, yes, but he was also kind. He used to volunteer at a soup kitchen. He'd mentor young staff. I know it's hard to believe now, but he was. Success changed Trevor in ways I didn't recognize until it was too late. He started seeing people as stepping stones, as categories. He built this wall of privilege around himself, and anyone who didn't fit, they were just obstacles. That's why I divorced him. I couldn't watch him become this person anymore. Rebecca's eyes, though still weary, held a genuine pain and regret. Rebecca leaned forward, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. He called me, Dr. Carter. The day he was terminated, he called me crying. Trevor hasn't cried since his father died, almost 20 years ago. He was broken. He said you showed him a mirror, and he couldn't stand what he saw. He said he finally understood what he'd become. He was horrified, Nicole. Genuinely horrified. Nicole listened, her thoughtful gaze fixed on the bustling street outside the coffee shop window. A subtle shimmer seemed to play across her face, as if Rebecca's words had indeed conjured a reflection, not of Nicole herself, but of the profound impact she'd had. The arrogant, untouchable CEO reduced to tears, confessing his self-loathing. It was a shocking confession of remorse, almost unbelievable given the man she'd encountered. He said he used to dismiss people like you, people like the others, as not Grand Meridian material, Rebecca continued, her voice trembling. But that day, when you stood there, so composed, so powerful, even as he tried to humiliate you, he saw himself through your eyes. He said it was like a veil lifted. He saw the prejudice, the arrogance, the ugliness, and it shattered him. Rebecca's earnest expression pleaded for understanding. Hez at rock bottom. He needs a chance to face this, not just run from it. Rebecca's voice was a desperate whisper, cutting through the low hum of the coffee shop, yet it struck Nicole with the force of a gong. Please, Dr. Carter. I know what he did was unforgivable. I'm not asking you to give him his job back, or to excuse anything. I need you to give him a chance to make it right. Nicole's gaze was steady, her expression unreadable. A chance to make what right, Rebecca? The public humiliation? The systemic discrimination? The countless people he dismissed because they didn't fit his narrow view of what success looked like? Her voice was calm, but the words were a steel trap. Rebecca leaned forward, her hand reaching across the small table, then hesitating, hovering in the air. To face it, to truly face what he did and what he became. If he just runs away, if he disappears from Chicago, he'll never really change. He'll just nurse his bitterness and find a new place to repeat the same mistakes. Sophie deserves a father who understands, who sees. Her eyes pleaded, raw and vulnerable. Give him a path, Dr. Carter. A path that's harder than just running. A path to genuine transformation. The weight of Rebecca's words settled heavily on Nicole. This wasn't about Trevor anymore. It was about the ripple effect of injustice and the unexpected burden of deciding another person's trajectory, even one who had caused so much pain. The bustling coffee shop sounds seemed to fade into a distant buzz as Nicole's thoughts turned inward, grappling with this unexpected moral dilemma. Nicole shifted her gaze from Rebecca's pleading face to the rain-streaked window of the coffee shop. The city outside, a blur of grey and muted colours, seemed to mirror the complex landscape of her own thoughts. Justice had been served. Trevor Hamilton had lost everything. His career, his reputation, his false sense of invincibility. It was a victory, a necessary outcome, and certainly a deeply satisfying one after the public humiliation she'd endured. So why did this new appeal stir such a profound conflict within her? She had the power to leave him there, broken and bitter, to let the consequences of his actions be his sole teacher. Many would argue that was precisely what he deserved, but Rebecca's words echoed, if he runs away, he'll never really change. Was true justice only about punishment, or was there a deeper, more challenging form of it that involved the possibility of growth, even for someone as flawed as Trevor? Could she, Nicole, be the catalyst for something harder than mere retribution, the chance for genuine, earned redemption. It was a burden she hadn't anticipated, a moral tightrope walk between personal satisfaction and a higher ideal of transformation. Her contemplative face was a mask of intense deliberation. Finally, Nicole turned back to Rebecca, her decision made. "Where is he now?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. Miles away, in a desolate, dimly lit storage unit on the outskirts of Chicago, Trevor Hamilton knelt on a concrete floor. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light filtering through a high window, illuminating a scene of profound defeat. Around him lay the detritus of his former life, a stack of framed awards, their polished surfaces reflecting only a warped version of his once proud face. A golf club, still in its pristine bag, leaning against a box labeled Grand Meridian memorabilia, and a scattering of expensive, but now meaningless, possessions. He was a shadow of his former self. His tailored suit replaced by a wrinkled shirt and jeans, his usually impeccable hair disheveled, a 5 o'clock shadow darkening his jaw. The scent of stale cardboard and forgotten dreams clung to the air. His shoulders slumped, his posture conveying utter capitulation. The storage unit felt like a tomb for his ambitions, a concrete box sealing him away from the world he had so carelessly dominated. He picked up a chipped porcelain figurine, a small replica of the Grand Meridian's iconic facade, and let it drop, clattering on the floor. His career, his identity, everything was over. There was nothing left for him here. He just wanted to escape, to run far away from the shame and the crushing weight of his colossal mistake. He was planning to leave Chicago by morning, to forget this ever happened. A soft click echoed in the silent storage unit, followed by the faint scrape of the large metal door. Trevor didn't look up, assuming it was the unit manager. He just wanted to be left alone. "Trevor?" The voice was calm, controlled, yet it cut through the haze of his despair like a razor. His head snapped up. Standing silhouetted in the doorway, a halo of afternoon light streaming behind her, was Dr. Nicole Carter. She was dressed in a sharp business suit, radiating the same quiet authority he remembered, but this time it was aimed directly at him. Her presence filled the dusty, cramped space, making his own defeat feel even more pronounced. Trevor scrambled to his feet, a pathetic, disheveled figure against her poised elegance. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He couldn't process what he was seeing. This was the woman he had publicly humiliated, the woman who had, in turn, dismantled his entire life. Why was she here? Nicole stepped fully into the unit, letting the door slide shut behind her, plunging them into a more intimate, yet no less tense silence. Her gaze swept over the discarded trophies, the boxes, then settled back on him. Her voice, devoid of triumph or anger, was simply direct. "What are you going to do now, Trevor?" He swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Leave Chicago," he managed, his voice hoarse. "Start over somewhere else. Try to forget this ever happened." Nicole listened, her expression unreadable. She took a step back, as if preparing to leave. The movement jolted Trevor. He couldn't let her go. Not yet. Not like this. "Wait," he choked out, his voice raw. He took a stumbling step forward, his hands outstretched in a desperate, pleading gesture. "Please. I'm so sorry." His eyes, red-rimmed and filled with a pain that Nicole recognized as genuine, locked onto hers. "I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm sorry for what I did to 46 other people. People I dismissed, people I treated like they didn't belong. And I'm sorry for what I became. The man who thought he was untouchable, who couldn't see beyond his own privilege." A tear tracked a path through the dust on his cheek. "I truly am sorry." Nicole's gaze sharpened, piercing his. "Are you sorry because you got caught, Trevor?" she asked, her voice low, testing. "Or are you sorry because you finally understand what you did?" He didn't hesitate. His voice was thick with emotion but firm. "I'm sorry because I finally understand. I had to lose everything to truly see. You showed me a mirror, Dr. Carter, and what I saw, it was horrifying." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of his confession. Nicole searched his eyes, and for the first time she saw not arrogance, not dismissal, but genuine, agonizing remorse. A long moment passed. Nicole's analytical gaze softened almost imperceptibly. The raw honesty in Trevor's voice, the genuine horror in his eyes, it was undeniable. He wasn't just contrite, he was fundamentally broken open. She took another step toward him, no longer preparing to leave, but to offer something unexpected. Her voice was quiet, but it held the full weight of her conviction. "Then maybe, Trevor," she said, her eyes holding his, "it's time to stop running and start learning." The words hung in the air, a lifeline thrown into his sea of despair. Trevor's tear-streaked face, already a landscape of defeat, slowly transformed. His brow furrowed in confusion, then realization dawned, a faint light in the darkness of the storage unit. His eyes, fixed on Nicole's, widened with a fragile, dawning hope. She wasn't offering him a way out of his consequences. She was offering him a different kind of path, a path that demanded accountability, growth, and a profound internal shift. It was harder than simply running away. It was a path that implied a future, not an end. It was the first glimmer of a chance for genuine redemption. 6 months. 6 months had passed since the seismic shift at the Grand Meridian. And stepping into the lobby now, Dr. Nicole Carter could feel the difference in her bones. The oppressive, cold grandeur was gone, replaced by a vibrant warmth. Spring sunlight streamed through the soaring windows, illuminating genuine smiles on staff faces, a diverse tapestry of guests checking in, lingering over coffee, or simply enjoying the ambience. The Grand Meridian wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a living, breathing testament to what intentional change could achieve. She watched as Marcus Thorne, now the proud general manager, moved through the space. His posture was confident, his interactions with guests fluid, warm, and personalized. He wasn't just checking them in, he was truly welcoming them, anticipating needs, making eye contact that spoke of genuine care, not just practiced politeness. The old stiffness, the subtle judgment that had permeated the air, had vanished. The atmosphere had been transformed by something more valuable than gold fixtures. Genuine hospitality. Nicole smiled, a deep, satisfied feeling settling in her chest. This was what it was all about. This was the vision she had fought for, now brought to vivid, profitable life. The transformation was palpable, a success story unfolding in real time. "Nicole," Aisha Patel's voice cut through the soft hum of the lobby, brimming with an almost childlike excitement. She practically bounced towards Nicole, a tablet clutched in her hand, her eyes sparkling. "You are not going to believe these numbers," Nicole chuckled, a knowing warmth in her gaze. "Try me, Aisha. I live for good numbers." Aisha tapped furiously on her tablet, pulling up a sleek infographic. "Okay, so for this past quarter, revenue is up 23% from last year. Guest satisfaction scores are at an all-time high, breaking every previous record. And get this, 78% of the business we lost due to the past incidents recovered. Not just recovered, but they've since booked additional events and extended stays." Nicole's smile widened, a quiet triumph shining in her eyes. "It's working, isn't it?" "Working?" Aisha practically beamed. "Nicole, the diversity and inclusion program isn't just the right thing to do. It's proving to be incredibly profitable. Other regional directors are calling Vivian daily, wanting to replicate our model. We are setting the industry standard, proving that genuine inclusion is the ultimate luxury experience." Her excitement was infectious, a validation of every difficult decision, every long hour. Nicole absorbed Aisha's triumphant report, a sense of deep satisfaction settling over her. This was the fruit of their labor, the tangible proof that justice and profit could indeed coexist. She looked around the now bustling lobby, filled with a vibrant energy that was entirely new. Just then Marcus approached, his expression a careful mix of professionalism and a subtle, knowing look. "Dr. Carter, the 10 o'clock meeting is ready for you in conference room B." Nicole felt a familiar flutter in her stomach, a mix of anticipation and a faint, almost subconscious dread. This was the meeting she'd been preparing for, mentally and emotionally, for weeks. The final, pivotal step in Trevor Hamilton's journey. She glanced at her watch. 10 o'clock on the dot. He was punctual, as always. "Thank you, Marcus." She paused, then turned to Aisha. "Aisha, would you mind joining me? I'd like you to be there." Aisha's brow furrowed slightly, a silent question in her eyes. She knew exactly who the meeting was with, and why Nicole might need a witness. "Of course, Nicole." She nodded, her expression shifting to one of determined support. Together, they walked towards the conference room, the sound of their footsteps echoing faintly in the no-harmonious lobby, each step a testament to the long journey that had led them here. As Nicole and Aisha pushed open the heavy oak door of Conference Room B, Trevor Hamilton rose from his seat at the head of the long table. The room was the same, elegant and imposing, but the man within it was profoundly, undeniably different. Nicole felt a jolt of surprise. It wasn't just the absence of his tailored suits and expensive watch. His hair was shorter, neatly trimmed, but less coiffed. There were new lines around his eyes, etched deeper than before, not from age, but from something closer to wariness, or perhaps introspection. His clothes were simple, unassuming, a plain collared shirt, dark trousers. No longer the uniform of a CEO, but of someone who simply worked. But it was his eyes that showed the deepest change. The arrogant certainty, the dismissive flicker she remembered from that fateful night, had been replaced by something harder to achieve, humility mixed with genuine understanding. He looked at Nicole, not with fear, but with a quiet respect, almost a plea. He seemed smaller, not physically, but in the way a once-inflated ego had deflated, leaving behind a more authentic, albeit weathered, human being. The transformation was startling, a stark visual representation of a soul stripped bare and rebuilt. Trevor cleared his throat, his voice softer, less resonant than Nicole remembered. "Dr. Carter, Miss Patel, thank you for meeting with me." Nicole nodded, gesturing for him to sit. "Mr. Hamilton, you wanted to discuss your progress?" He sat, clasping his hands on the table, a nervous but earnest energy radiating from him. "Yes. I didn't leave Chicago, not after our last conversation. You told me to stop running and start learning, and I took that to heart." He took a deep breath. "I'm a housing coordinator for New Horizons Community Services, full-time." Aisha's eyebrows raised in surprise, and even Nicole, who had anticipated change, felt a flicker of genuine astonishment. A housing coordinator. The man who had once lorded over a luxury hotel, dismissing those he deemed unfit, was now dedicated to helping the underprivileged. "I help families navigate the system, find stable housing, access resources," Trevor continued, a genuine passion creeping into his voice. "It's humbling. These are the people I spent years looking down on without even realizing it. They're resilient, resourceful, and they deserve so much more than what they're given." His gaze met Nicole's, a profound sincerity in his eyes. "It's given me a very different perspective." "And the bias training?" Nicole asked, her voice measured, observing him closely. "The program we implemented?" Trevor nodded, a faint, almost shy smile touching his lips. "I completed it, all of it. Not because I had to, but because I finally understood that I needed to. I honestly, truly believed I wasn't racist, that I didn't see color, as I so foolishly told you." He shook his head, a look of genuine regret crossing his face. "But I had absorbed so many unconscious biases, so many stereotypes, that they informed every decision, every judgment I made, especially in moments of stress or perceived threat to my standards. The program, it helped me recognize that impact matters more than intent. My intent might not have been malicious, but the impact of my actions was devastating, and that's what matters." Aisha exchanged a glance with Nicole, a shared look of impressed surprise. This wasn't just lip service. Trevor had clearly done the hard, internal work. He understood. He truly understood. It was a profound, almost unbelievable transformation, born from the ashes of his public downfall. Trevor Hamilton looked at Dr. Nicole Carter, then at Aisha Patel, his eyes still holding a profound humility. He reached into a plain manila envelope and pulled out a single, folded sheet of paper, his hands no longer trembling from fear, but from a quiet anticipation. He handed it to Nicole. "This is a letter," he began, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "And this is proof." He pushed a bank statement across the table. Nicole's eyes widened as she scanned the figures. The statement showed a substantial, irrevocable donation. "I've taken my entire severance package," Trevor continued, his gaze steady, "every cent, and I've used it to establish the Trevor Hamilton Scholarship for Hospitality Excellence. It's full tuition for students from underrepresented backgrounds, administered through a third-party nonprofit." Aisha gasped softly, a hand flying to her mouth. Nicole felt a wave of awe wash over her, quickly followed by a deep, unexpected sense of vindication. "I can't undo what I did," Trevor said, his voice thick with emotion, "but maybe I can help ensure the industry has more leaders who look like the communities they serve. Leaders who see everyone." Nicole stared at the bank statement, then at Trevor, a complex mix of emotions swirling within her. This wasn't just a gesture, it was a profound act of self-sacrifice, a tangible commitment to change. She looked at Aisha, who nodded subtly, her eyes reflecting the same astonishment and cautious hope. "Mr. Hamilton," Nicole began, her voice steady but with an underlying current of a new idea forming. "What you've done here, it's significant. It shows a genuine commitment to understanding and correcting the wrongs you perpetuated." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. Trevor's gaze was fixed on her, a raw vulnerability in his eyes. "International Grandeur Holdings," Nicole continued, extending a hand, palm open, "is expanding our bias training program to include a speaker bureau. We're looking for individuals who have learned from significant mistakes and are willing to share their journey honestly to help others avoid the same pitfalls. We'd like you to consider joining that program as an independent contractor." Trevor's eyes widened, disbelief warring with a sudden, overwhelming surge of emotion. A single tear tracked down his weathered cheek. The arrogant CEO from 6 months ago would have scoffed. This man looked like he'd been offered a lifeline from a storm. Trevor stared at Nicole's outstretched hand, then back at her face, searching for any hint of mockery or pity. There was none, only a quiet, unwavering professionalism and a profound wisdom. His throat tightened. "6 months ago," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion, "I threw you out of this hotel. I publicly humiliated you. I dismissed your presence, your very right to be here. Now you're offering me a chance to help other people avoid making the same mistakes?" He looked from Nicole to Aisha, his genuine shock evident. Nicole's expression softened slightly, a hint of a gentle smile gracing her lips. "That's what redemption looks like, Mr. Hamilton," she said, her voice clear and resonant. "It's not an erasure of the past, but a transformation of it into something useful, something that benefits others. Your story, shared with authenticity, could be a powerful deterrent and a profound lesson for countless others in this industry and beyond." Trevor nodded slowly, then decisively. He took her outstretched hand, his grip firm. "I accept, Dr. Carter. Thank you." The room, once a battleground, now hummed with the quiet hum of possibility. The meeting concluded, and Nicole watched Trevor Hamilton leave the conference room, his shoulders still slumped, but his step now imbued with a quiet purpose. He was a different man. She exchanged a satisfied glance with Aisha before making her way back into the vibrant Grand Meridian lobby, now a place of genuine warmth and welcome. Sunlight streamed through the soaring windows, illuminating diverse groups of guests mingling comfortably. The soft murmur of conversation and the clinking of glasses created a symphony of relaxed elegance. Nicole smiled, thinking of the video call she'd had with her parents earlier that week. her father's voice thick with pride as she described the hotel's transformation. She felt a deep sense of contentment. Her work here in Chicago was becoming a blueprint, a standard. Soon, she'd be traveling to oversee the opening of a new international grandeur holdings property, designed from the ground up with her principles of radical inclusion at its core. This wasn't just about one hotel or one man. This was about changing an industry. As Nicole paused near the concierge desk, admiring the smooth operation under Marcus Thorne's watchful eye, Marcus himself approached her, a wide, genuine smile on his face. He held a small, folded note. "Dr. Carter," he said, his voice full of warmth. "I think you'll want to see this." He handed her the note. Nicole recognized the elegant script. It was from Dr. and Mrs. Johnson, the couple who had been unjustly denied a room months ago, before her arrival. They had returned to the Grand Meridian. Nicole unfolded the note and read, "Dear Dr. Carter, we wanted to express our profound gratitude. We returned to the Grand Meridian this week, with some trepidation, we admit. But from the moment we walked in, we felt welcomed and valued. The difference is truly remarkable. Thank you for transforming not just this hotel, but our faith in the possibility of change. You have created a truly grand and truly meridian place. With deepest appreciation, Dr. and Mrs. Johnson." A warm feeling spread through Nicole's chest. This, she realized, was the true measure of their success. Not just numbers, but renewed faith. Nicole refolded the note, a profound sense of satisfaction settling over her. "This means a lot, Marcus," she said, looking up at him. "Thank you for bringing it to me." Marcus nodded, his smile unwavering. "It means a lot to all of us, Dr. Carter, more than you know." He paused, then spoke with a sincerity that touched her deeply. "You know, before you came, we all felt stuck, like we were just doing our jobs, but not truly believing in what we were doing. We saw things, we knew things weren't right, but there was no path to change." He gestured around the bustling lobby. "Now look at this. We're not just providing luxury, we're providing genuine hospitality. We're proud to work here. I wanted to thank you, personally, for giving all of us the chance to be part of something better, for showing us that it was possible." Nicole met his gaze, a shared understanding passing between them. "The credit belongs to everyone who chose to embrace that change, Marcus," she replied, her voice soft, "including you." With a final nod to Marcus, Nicole turned and began her walk towards the main entrance. The magnificent lobby, once a gilded cage for prejudice, now felt like a soaring open space filled with light and laughter. As she pushed open the grand glass doors, her reflection caught her eye. She saw a confident, composed woman, leaving not in humiliation, but by choice, on her own terms. A doorman, a young man named Carlos, whom Nicole remembered from the early bias training sessions, held the door for her. He had been one of the most engaged participants, and his genuine smile now radiated a quiet pride in his work. "Good evening, Dr. Carter. See you tomorrow," Carlos said warmly. Nicole returned his smile. "See you tomorrow, Carlos." She stepped out into the cool evening air, the Grand Meridian sign glowing brightly behind her. It wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a beacon, a testament to the idea that true hospitality wasn't about who you let in, but about how you welcomed everyone. And so, this incredible story of justice, bias, and unlikely redemption comes to a close. From a moment of public humiliation, Dr. Nicole Carter rose to transform an entire corporate culture, proving that integrity and inclusion aren't just ethical imperatives, but powerful drivers of success. And Trevor Hamilton? His journey reminds us that true change is possible, even for those who seem lost to their own prejudices. It's a painful, humbling process, but one that can lead to a profound and meaningful path of atonement. This story makes us ask, what spaces in your life, your workplace, or your community could use more inclusion? Where can you challenge assumptions, and where can you, like Nicole, lead with courage, or like Trevor, find the humility to truly learn and change? If this story resonated with you, if it left you inspired, or even just thinking, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories like this, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us bring these powerful narratives to life. Thank you for watching this story to the end. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep fighting for a more just world.